welcome to the legislative breakfast for June. We appreciate the fact that all of you have come out today to, we will introduce later, the most popular governor in the United States. And there was a poll that was out, no pressure, Governor. There was a poll that was out that stated that our governor in the state of Vermont is the most popular governor with the folks that are in his state. And he is right over here, ladies and gentlemen. We're not going to have him come up yet, but let's give the most popular governor in the state of Vermont a round of applause. All right. So I would first like to start out by thanking Southside Steakhouse. Thank you very much for your support here today. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Omnia, who are supporting this event. I would also like to thank PEG TV for their support with the sound system. Thank you, Tom and all. So process today, just going to go through the process. On your table are some cards. If you have specific questions, if you would please write your question on the card, and I'm going to come around at the end after the governor speaks, and if you have questions that have not been answered, please just put them on that card, and I'll come around, just put it up in the air, and I'll ask your question. I'm going to start out by introducing the legislators who are in the room, the people that go to Montpelier and spend a lot of time for us, people that are working on our behalf, bringing money, grants, all sorts of things to our county. First, Representative Tom Burdett. Where is Tom? Right over here. Let's give Tom a nice round of applause. Next, Representative Bill Canfield. Bill, where are you? Right here. Give him a nice round of applause. And Representative Robin Chestnut Tangerman right over here. Let's give him a nice round of applause. He is he with Paul Clifford? Where's Representative Paul Clifford? Over here. I'd also like to introduce Jim Harrison. Where is Representative Jim Harrison? Also, Representative Eric McGuire. Where's Eric? Thank you, Eric. Also, Representative Patty McCoy. I believe she's over here, ladies and gentlemen. Also, Representative Will Knott. Where is Will? In the back of the room. Also, Representative Art Peterson. Where is Art? Right here. Also with us today, Senator David Weeks. Where is Senator Weeks? Right over here. And also, Senator Terry Williams. Where is Senator Williams? Right over here. And also, Representative Mary Howard. Where is Mary? Right here, right in front of me. All right. Before I introduce Butch, who is going to introduce the governor, I would also like to introduce our mayor, Mike Dunges, who is right over here. And the problem every time is I forget someone who is very, very important. I did. Thanks to Butch, who walked around and made sure I had everybody on the list. All right. So without further ado, because you didn't come here to listen to me, we are the Chamber and Economic Development of the Rutland region. We serve you. We work for you. And part of that is bringing people together today to hear about what's going on statewide that will affect us regionally. So first, to kick things off, I'd like to have you help me welcome the delegation chair from the Rutland region, that is Butch Shaw. Representative Shaw.
He just told me how to use a microphone, so thank you for that. 15 years in Montpelier, and this is what I get. So, thank you, Lyle, for that wonderful introduction and for the invitation to introduce, on behalf of the Rutland County Legislative Delegation, our guest speaker for today, Governor Phil Scott. I do remember about 30 years ago, I first met Phil when I was performing work as a subcontractor for his construction company on a parking lot rehab project at the Vermont State House. Little did I know or expect that as a legislator, I would have the opportunity to introduce him as governor of the state of Vermont to you so many years later. The road of life surely has some strange turns, right, Governor? Phil Scott was first elected the 82nd governor of Vermont in 2016 after serving as lieutenant governor for 6 years and as a senator representing Washington County for 10 years, where he served as vice chair of the powerful Senate Committee on Transportation and as chair of the influential Committee on Institution. In his personal life, he's a lifelong Vermonter who grew up in Barrie and is a proud graduate of Spalding High School and the University of Vermont. He's been known to bicycle around the state. And I've heard he might be some sort of a successful race car driver at Thunder Road in Barrie. He currently holds the trophy for having the most career wins as a late model driver at Thunder Road. And then I asked him one day, Governor, why is your car the number 14? And his answer to me was clever. He said, because there's 14 counties in Vermont. And I will not ask that question again, because I'm not sure about the answer. Today, Governor Scott lives in Berlin with his lovely wife, Diana McTeague Scott, and has 2 grown daughters. As governor, Phil Scott has focused his efforts on growing the Vermont economy, making Vermont more affordable, and protecting Vermont's most vulnerable citizens. He's been true to this philosophy. And in November, the voters of Vermont embraced his efforts by electing him last November with 70% of the votes cast. And as you heard earlier, today he is the most popular governor in the country. With Governor Scott at the helm of the state of Vermont, southwestern Vermont, and especially Rutland County, is no longer one of the forgotten areas in the state. He has made sure that our needs are heard throughout his administration, as can be witnessed by the exceptional grant opportunities for economic development, housing, climate change mitigation, and workforce development that have been directed through Rutland County. With all that being said, please give the governor of the great state of Vermont, Philip B. Scott, a warm Rutland County welcome. Governor.
And good morning, and thank you, former representative, for giving me the tip on holding the mic close to my mouth. I want to thank Representative Shaw. Thanks to all of you for having me. It's great to be back in Rutland once again. There's a lot of issues that I'm sure are on the minds of many, and I thought I'd start with one that's getting a lot of attention. Right now, because the feds ended the state of emergency, we're in the process of transitioning from the pandemic hotel-motel program to a system that we believe will be better for clients, the communities, and the state, and for far less money. For some historical context, our General Assistance Emergency Housing Program existed long before the pandemic. But back then, we'd have about 50 households statewide on any given night, or about 150 when the temperature dropped. Then at the very beginning of the pandemic, with funding from FEMA, we put people who would otherwise be in a shelter into hotels because physical distancing was impossible. Over time, it ballooned into something quite different, and after 3 years, it's clear it's not working as well as we want it to, and working well at all. I know this program has been a serious challenge here in Rutland, putting pressure on public safety and creating a lot of concern and frustration, including with the state. And I understand and accept that. We've tried to end it a few times over the last couple of years, but while the federal government was still paying the bill, and we were working to invest in permanent housing solutions, it proved difficult to end. But with the end of the federal funding, we're moving back to the pre-pandemic approach and using the resources of all our agencies and departments in state government to build a better housing system, working with municipalities, state-funded housing programs, and community groups. We have to remember, homelessness is often the result of issues like mental health and substance misuse. So the best way to address it is to get ahead of it by strengthening our communities, growing our economy, and focusing on health and safety. So all Vermonters have a strong foundation, opportunities to succeed, and financial sustainability. And that's really what me and my team have been working on for the last couple of years. Now, we have an opportunity to achieve this thanks to billions in federal funding coming out of the pandemic. 2 years ago, I said we need to use this funding, specifically the $1.25 billion in ARPA funding, for programs like that coupled with programs like IIJA and the Inflation Reduction Act, to focus on the fundamentals so we can change the trajectory in Vermont. I propose in the legislature, for the most part, supported focusing on 5 buckets to take on long-standing challenges: housing, broadband, economic development, like jobs and workforce, water, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure, and climate change mitigation, with weatherization being a major component. By putting federal money into tangible projects, we invest and not just spend this one-time money, so we can actually see the benefit in the long term. When I presented my agenda to the legislature back in January, I talked with them and asked them to work with me to follow through on what we started so we could seize the moment, so to speak, especially for communities that have been challenged for decades. And this year we found ourselves in pretty good financial shape with about a $390 million state surplus. Again, I said to the legislature that it's critical we invest, not spend, this surplus, because we know economic storm clouds are on the horizon, and these windfalls may not last. I asked them to work with me to use these stimulus funds to revitalize our county economic centers like Rutland, while continuing to focus on the fiscal fundamentals. That's led to these year after year surpluses over the last couple of years, because that's how I think we make Vermont better, by having and helping families and communities in the areas of the state that have been struggling for far too long. In my inaugural address, I reminded legislators that 50 years ago, Springfield was a worldwide leader in manufacturing with the highest per capita income in Vermont, highest per capita income. Rutland, and places like Bellows Falls, Bennington, St. Johnsbury, Newport, and my hometown of Barrie, have similar stories. Not long ago, they were thriving as well, but have since seen they've struggled in many areas, and they've struggled to keep pace with Burlington and other places in Chittenden County. That's why we're working to reverse the trends too many across Vermont have felt and restore the economy from region to region. The budget I put forward at the start of the year was all geared toward communities like yours. The approach we've taken starts with a focus on basic infrastructure, like housing, broadband, roads and bridges, climate resiliency, and the water, sewer, and stormwater systems needed for both clean water and economic growth. My budget also proposed a lot more money for childcare, tax relief for Vermonters who need it most, strengthening downtowns, workforce training and recruitment, and a renewed focus on career technical education and trades training. And I'm passionate about that because I'm a product of it. At this point, most of us realize we need workers in every sector, but it continues to plague us because we have to focus on the trades. Without the tradespeople, we can't keep the lights on or the water running. We can't keep the roads or the vehicles on them safe. We can't build the houses or businesses we need, maintain our hospitals or schools, or keep up with our climate mitigation projects. Without them, we really can't do much. That's why it's important to continue focusing on the trades. But we also have to do more to reduce the stigma that sometimes exists. Everyone, from teachers and guidance counselors to parents and policymakers, needs to make a real effort to end the stigma around CTE and trades training, because these are great careers. They present endless possibilities for smart, talented, and hardworking kids. Beyond economic issues, we have worked closely with legislators on safety initiatives to keep our schools and streets safer, which is essential to building stronger communities. And the good news is, The legislature included funding and worked with us to pass many of these proposals. It takes this kind of holistic approach to restore the strength and vitality of communities like Rutland, Barrie, Springfield, and Bennington, and so many more across the state. All the pieces have to fit together. For strong, healthy, and safe communities, we need to grow our workforce. To grow our workforce, we need more housing, childcare, good schools, and thriving downtowns. We also need to help families keep more of what they earn so they can actually enjoy all Vermont has to offer instead of pushing them to the point where they are just barely getting by. And where I mentioned the good news earlier, the bad piece is about affordability. Because while the legislature funded many of my initiatives, they also spent a lot more than I did, and way too much, in my opinion. That's why I've already vetoed a few bills that have increased costs on everyday Vermonters. And stay tuned, there may be a few more in the next couple of weeks. We haven't received all the bills yet. But let's start with the budget. The $8.5 billion bill the legislature passed relies on a new payroll tax, increases DMV fees by 20%, and grows base spending at more than twice the rate of inflation, which just isn't sustainable in the long run. When you consider the $100 million payroll tax, $20 million in DMV fees, $30 million in property tax pressure, at least $180 million in costs once the so-called affordable heat standard, which I unsuccessfully vetoed, by the way, is fully implemented. All that works out to an average of about $1,200 per household per year. These costs will hit nearly every Vermonter in every income bracket, but I'm particularly concerned about the elderly on fixed incomes. This is simply too much, especially when we've been challenged by an affordability crisis for decades, for far too long. I hear it from everyday Vermonters on a daily basis. It's one of the reasons I ran for governor in the first place. Whether it's young Vermonters just starting out, seniors on fixed incomes who've lived here their whole lives, or working families trying to get by, we're simply too expensive for too many people. And with high inflation, the last thing we should be doing is adding to the affordability problem by imposing new and higher taxes, fees, and penalties. That's especially true when we have record surpluses. And at the same time they're adding all these costs, the legislature voted to give themselves a raise and new health care benefits. Another bill I vetoed because it's unfair to insulate themselves from all these costs they've been passing on to everyone else. And if they really wanted to attract more people to run for office, they'd reduce the length of the session. Because the people I talk to about running for office never, ever ask me how much it pays. But they always ask me how long the session is. So I believe if we can reduce the length of the session, we'd have more people stepping up to run. Very difficult to get into a process where you don't know when the end is. Sometimes I've been there until the middle of June. Sometimes we get out the first part of May. But it's hard to tell an employer that you want to do some public service, you want to step up, you want to run, when you don't know how long the session is going to be. What's worse, not only are they hell-bent on raising taxes and fees and making it more expensive to live here, they didn't even consider many of the ideas that I had to provide some relief. For example, the legislature didn't even take up my proposals for tax relief for senior citizens on fixed incomes, expanding the earned income tax credit, which helps low-income working families, or joining the vast majority of states by fully exempting military retirement pay from the state income tax. And they cut my funding request for the Vermont Housing Improvement Program by 33%. VHIP helps small landlords fix up vacant units so they can be rented and returned to rental. And it's been incredibly successful. In just the last couple of years, it's brought nearly 600 more units online. most of these going to help people exit homelessness. And it's been a faster turnaround than we have before, than the new renovations, at about 1/10 the cost of other state programs. So it makes no sense to cut this money. They also reduced my proposal for missing middle housing, because what we need now is more middle income housing. We've been focusing a lot on low income housing, but affordable homes for the middle class are practically non-existent, as well as tuition breaks for CCV students and more. These are just a handful of examples, and we have many of them, where we could make Vermont more affordable, but couldn't find common ground with the majority in the legislature. So while you read about all my vetoes, I hope it's clear there's a common theme. It comes down to affordability and whether these initiatives are sustainable. And from my perspective, preventing unsustainable spending is why I've been elected and re-elected for over the years, to provide balance, common sense, and fiscal responsibility. And despite what some may think and may report on, I actually don't look forward to vetoes. But I will follow through on my promise to make Vermont more affordable and more competitive with other states. Now, in regards to the legislature, I know it sounds like there's a lot of disagreement and no way to resolve it, but the fact is we share many of the same goals. And we can take meaningful steps in all areas without raising taxes and fees. For example, my paid family and medical leave initiative is voluntary, and we've already set up the mechanism. State employees are going to be eligible on July 1, which we, the state, are paying for. And Hartford Insurance will be offering it to private employers within the year. This is a much faster turnaround than the legislature's plan, which didn't pass this session, by the way, but is still on the table for next year and calls for another $100 million payroll tax. Unlike the legislature's plan, my approach won't require any new IT, and we don't need the 65 additional state employees to oversee it. And it can be scaled and customized. For childcare, my budget included $56 million from existing revenue to cover 4,000 more kids. This would let us take a huge step forward without raising taxes on working Vermonters and employers. My point is, there's a lot of common ground. It's just about the pace in which we get there and how we pay for it. I hope when the legislature comes back for the veto session, they'll finally join me at the table and consider my ideas to make progress on these shared priorities in a way that's sustainable and without adding costs to those who can least afford it. So if you agree with anything I've said today, I hope you let your legislators know, and sooner rather than later. Although I have to say, Rutland County legislators aren't the problem for the most part. It is really the supermajority, and I can't stop this freight train on my own. Now, I know I shared a lot with you today, so I'm sure you have some questions, follow-up questions. I'd be happy to try and answer. And at this point, I'll turn it back over to Lyle. Okay.
Well, there is a lot going on and a lot of moving parts. And you may have some questions that the governor did not address. Thank you very much. And I'm just going to keep coming around. The question is, why are we not currently taking advantage of the thousands of migrants and refugees to increase our young population, train workers for fulfilling jobs, including language training, housing, etc.?
Well, we actually are, and it's something that we've been focusing on for the last few years, in fact, with the previous administration. Now, I want to go back a bit. I believe we need a better immigration policy in this country. And this is the fault of both parties. And this has been punted back and forth over the last 20 years. But we in Vermont have been asking for more refugees as well. I wrote to President Trump when he was in office. Didn't receive, wrote to him a couple of times asking for more in terms of our quota. And we wrote to the President Biden as well. And subsequently, we've received more. But we want to welcome more into the state because it really is part of the answer. Not only is it a moral obligation, but it'll benefit us because what we face is a demographic crisis in the state. We're getting older. The median age is about 46 or 47 at this point in time. It's resulted in a workforce crisis that we have. So we need more people, and it's something that, again, we've focused on since day one over the last 7 years. If you remember, I had that 6-3-1 slogan, and the 6 was the number of workers we're losing from the workforce every single day, and that's still happening due to retirement and the aging of our population. But we need to fix some of the other problems along the way as well, housing being a big one. And that's something that, again, we've worked with the legislature on because I think we all understand that. We passed that housing bond, if you remember, when I was first in office, the first or second year, we passed a $37 million housing bond. That was the biggest investment in housing Vermont has ever seen, $37 million. Today, by comparison, it pales because we've invested about 350, 400 million at this point and growing. And that doesn't account for the private investment. The 37 million leveraged another almost 200 million in private investment. And so that's been helpful. And now with this 250 million and all the private investment that's going on, plus the hundreds of millions more that we're trying to leverage, we're well on our way, but it can't come quick enough. And I've said, and I believe that we have a housing crisis in Vermont, but if it is the emergency that everyone says it is, you have to do extraordinary things. You have to take extraordinary steps. And one of those steps is regulatory reform, Act 250 in particular. And it's something that I've asked for the last 6 years. And we really haven't solved it. We need to modernize it. And it's a 50-some-year-old provision law that needs updating. And if we really want to get this done, we're going to have to move things forward because we have some housing projects that have been trapped in Act 250 for a couple of years. So we need to pave the way if we want to solve it.
Focusing on the refugee resettlement piece, if you are an employer and you are looking for employees, on June 20th at the Hub CoWorks, CEDRR will be sponsoring an informational session with the refugee resettlement program at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Hopefully you get our newsletter. That will come out in our newsletter, but again, that's June 20th at the Hub CoWorks, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll go over regulations and things that you need to be aware of when you are hiring refugees. And to continue along the line of the Act 250, Governor, how do you plan to work with the legislature and continue to move those efforts forward? And if you had a crystal ball and you could make it happen, what would you do?
Well, we've been trying, again, for the last 6 years. We've had multiple bills, some of them sponsored by Rutland County, the Rutland County delegation. But it really, it hits a brick wall, and nothing seems to get done. And it's incremental at best, but we need big change right now. And so we'll see what happens. Again, I'm not ruling out. The Speaker of the House had asked, after I vetoed the budget, had asked that I declare a state of emergency. Now, a state of emergency is something that shouldn't be overused, and should be used wisely. We used it after Irene. That was the right thing to do. We used it during the pandemic, which I thought was the right thing to do as well. But it gives you extraordinary powers. It will free up some money. It will let you leverage certain aspects, and it will allow you to move through some of the regulatory process. So we'll see what happens. We'll go through the next couple of months, and but if it may take a state of emergency to really put a dent in this housing crisis that we face.
And from a dietitian, understanding the value of nutrition only works if you eat the food. Since we now have universal free meals at schools, do we know how much food is consumed and not wasted?
We don't, that I know of. I'm sure somebody does. That brings up another point. I'm not as excited about the universal school meal program as some. It seems counterintuitive from my standpoint. I want to help kids. I think we have an obligation to help those families to feed their kids and help them get a good education, and part of that good education comes with having a stomach that's full and when they can focus on learning. But to pay for more affluent families, more affluent kids, just doesn't strike me as the right balance. And having some of those, the very people we're trying to help pay for the affluent kids for universal meals, just doesn't make sense to me at all. So we'll see what happens with that. I know there's differences of opinion, but that's going to add another $30 million to the property tax pressure. So, but we'll see.
I'm sorry, I keep moving around and making you look for me, but Castleton University is to Rutland City as UVM is to Chittenden County. Now I'm going to speak from my personal feelings. Castleton University is an economic driver for our region. And it would appear that we are commingling everything with all of the other schools, and that we may not have cost centers where we can tell who is actually driving the ship. And I don't know if you have a thought on, or we don't know if you have a thought on the university system, where it is right now, and is it on the right track in your opinion?
Yeah, you know, when I first came into office, I remember talking with Jeb Spalding, and he said we desperately need more money, more state money. And I put it in my budget. It was cut some in my budget. I think I put like $5-6 million in there to see if we could help. It wasn't as though we didn't have any surpluses at that point in time. It was when I first arrived as governor. And but years since then, we continued to ask for more money from the legislature. The legislature wasn't as attuned as Jeb had asked, and said that they were in desperate straits. Well, it proved to be the case, and unfortunately, it took a crisis in some respects of the system itself to get us where we are today, where now we've put tens of millions of dollars into our state college system or university system at this point. But it has to be sustainable. We can't keep pouring money into it if it's not going to be sustainable. Part of the problem with the and I'm going to keep calling it the state college system because that's what I remember. But part of the problem with the state college system is it was all due to not having enough customers, right? They didn't have enough people coming in, not enough students to pay the bills. And it all relates back to what I was talking about, the 631. The 6 was the workforce every single day, 6 fewer workers in the workforce. The second was three fewer kids in our schools every single day. We've seen a decline in the number of students in Vermont, number of youth. So when you think about that, okay, so we have 3 fewer. When I was in school, I think we had over 105,000 K through 12 students. Today it's around 75. So you can see there's been a tremendous drop in the number of students. 90% of the students, and Lyle, you can attest to this, I think, but 90% of the students that graduated from the state college system were Vermont kids. They were the ones who went to the school. So when you see that we have 3 fewer kids every single day in our K through 12 program, fewer kids overall, that led to where it shouldn't have been a surprise, but it was. We weren't paying attention. But that was the problem with the system. So we need to right size the system. I know they're working very hard to do that. I think they're under a mandate from the legislature to reduce their need by cut costs by $5 million every single year, and that doesn't come easily. But I would agree, Castleton University, they were the first university of the state college system, and it is an economic driver for this region, and we desperately need all those economic drivers to survive and to bring us back to where we were. Like I said, the Rutlands of the world, the Barries of the world, the Springfields of the world. There's a path forward, but it has to be economic development, and our state colleges and universities are part of that economic system.
Well, and 70% of the students at Castleton University are from the state of Vermont. We hope to retain them. Also, not to keep talking about what CEDRR is doing, but on, I believe it's Tuesday the 27th, there's a group called CURAB, and that is the Castleton University Regional Advisory Board, and there are a number of business leaders and legislators on that committee. We will be meeting with Mike Smith, who is the current president of the state college system, to talk about the decline in enrollment, which most recently was pointed out to be about 22% from where they were last year, and what they plan to do about bringing that enrollment back up. Question about housing shortage and affordability. No one seems to be talking about a move years ago that would limit rebates on property taxes for the first 400,000. With housing skyrocketing, do we need to think about changing that, and particularly when it comes to reappraisals? Because there are a large number of towns and municipalities that need to reappraise, and they're getting in line at this point. And I know the city of Rutland's looking now, and Mike can correct me, but 2026, a reappraisal for Rutland City. What do you feel about property tax reappraisals, affordability, and rebates on property up to 400,000?
Yeah, well, again, the grand list is growing because of the higher real estate costs, and some due to the pandemic, some naturally, and that's good news, bad news, right? The grand list grows. That should reduce our property taxes, and while it's reduced our rate, it hasn't reduced our property taxes. So we need to continue to make sure that everyone is even throughout the state, and that's what the reappraisals are about, so everybody's paying their fair share. But the fair part is the big one, right? We need to make sure it's fair for everyone. But we again, I don't have all the answers to that. We'll probably have to have our tax commissioner come in and talk about some of the intricacies of that. And we'll have to have conversations with the legislature as well about how we make sure that big cost factor for most of us is property taxes. And again, we want to pay our fair share, but we don't want to pay over what we can afford.
We appreciate the Treasurer Pichak's 10% for Vermont. I think you probably had something to do with that and getting money out to the rest of the state. Could you outline for folks that don't know about that what the 10% for Vermont program is intended to do? And it has launched at this point.
Yeah, it's just using existing cash, really. 10% of the cash we have can be utilized for other purposes. And we have a lot of cash due to, I believe, due to all the federal money coming into Vermont. It really has stimulated our economy, maybe overstimulated our economy in some respects. So this cash might not be here forever, but I want to take advantage of it while it's here. so that we can invest in areas like housing, so that we can make sure that we put it in the right places. This is something I keep talking about, probably more than people want me to, but I truly believe we need to invest money, and it's something that's at my core. Invest it, then we can see the benefits of it in the long run. But if we spend it, we just spend it, then we don't see the benefit, and it just is forgotten. I remember back in my early days in the legislature when I was in the Senate, and we had a lot of federal money come our way at that point through another economic downturn. And we didn't spend it wisely. We didn't invest it the way we should. And to this day, if anyone could tell me what we used it for, had any tangible benefit, I would be all ears, because I think that's why I believe that what we're doing today is the right thing. Investing in areas that give us the highest rate of return and that will benefit us into the future, because we're challenged. We've been challenged for a while, and just utilizing every lever we have, and this 10% is one part that will be helpful to us, but just investing it.
So Rutland County is applying for quite a bit of that 10% money, so stay tuned for that. And also I want to thank the governor. In his budget, he had $500,000 this year, and it was split 3 ways between 3 different business incubators, one of which is our Hub Co-work Startup Rutland. So we appreciated that support. It was matching money for a grant that we received, and we could not have done it without the state of Vermont, so thank you for that. Along those lines, where can the state improve in its support of innovation-based companies? How would you recommend the state improve, or are you doing it, supporting innovation-based companies?
Yeah, I believe we're doing it, and again, a lot of it is due to some federal money. Senator Leahy started the Northern Borders Grant Program. That's an innovative approach, and to help some of the communities that have been left behind, and that's in the counties. And he was successful in expanding that to the whole state. It used to be just in the upper tier of Vermont, but that's been tremendously helpful, and continues to utilize funding to help again those counties that are struggling to get by with real capital investments. And investment is the key word once again. So we're doing it. We can always do more, but we've been working with the legislature on that, and over the last couple of years, 2 or 3 years, and we're seeing some benefit to that.
And I apologize.
We can't forget, you know, that's the other, a lot of folks say, well, why are we trying to recruit more companies to come to Vermont? Why we don't have the workforce here? But there's ebbs and flows to our economy. We see businesses that have natural kind of downturns. We've seen quite a few of those of late, which gives me a little bit of pause because we were booming for a while. So we need to continue to attract more businesses to the state. We need to continue to work. We've been working across the border into Quebec in particular, Canada, and in other regions of Canada, but Quebec in particular, to try and bring more of those companies here, because it's going to be essential for us to continue to be as versatile as we can, and to have all different types of businesses, so that we don't have rely on one sector or one business to provide everything. So it's good to be diversified.
And I apologize for making this sound like a long commercial for the Chamber of Economic Development, but Senator Leahy, in his role, provided us with $500,000 towards the Hub Co-works. We're very fortunate for his generosity. Can we ask you to veto another bill? This one is H-471, and it has components in it that seriously diminish the power of tax increment finance districts. TIF to the state is a powerful tool. And within that, what we were hoping to do was to be able to combine tax stabilization and offering increment. And within H-471, It eliminates the option of having tax stabilization taking place at the same time that you have a TIF. And I won't bore all of you with the complications of what a TIF is, but it's a way to keep money local to develop infrastructure, and it's a great tool for the state of Vermont. And I'll embarrass him and say that John Russell is in the room here, and John is the chair of the VEPSI board, the Vermont Economic Progress Council, if I have that correct. And he and I haven't specifically talked about asking the governor to veto this, just so you know. That's coming from someone in the audience. Your thoughts?
Well, I'll put it on the list. I'm not familiar with that one, but I'm a big fan of TIFs, and it's something that we've had some success in expanding to smaller communities, and I think that it's been essential, again, for Vermont. We need all the tools in the toolbox, and that's a big one. And so we'll take a look and see if it doesn't come to the forefront.
H461.
461,
Yeah.
got it, H461.
I'll send you an email.
Okay.
H461. And just watch what the TIF is going to do, because the TIF was successfully applied for and received in the town of Killington. Jim Half is here. He was the mover and shaker there. Just raise your hand, Jim. He was the mover and shaker on the board, the select board there. You will see amazing growth in the town of Killington because of the TIF. It will bring economic development for our entire region. It will not just happen on the mountain. Things are going to come down to Rutland and out to Middletown Springs and other places because more people will come here. It's a public-private partnership that we have never seen, and I don't think that there are around the nation other public-private partnerships like we have with Killington. With the resort, and Mike Salamano's here, and with the town, and with the businesses up there, it's a wonderful three-legged stool. Watch for the growth that's going to happen in the future. I didn't have any other cards, and I'm going to keep talking unless you give me another card. Okay, we have a couple more. And then we're going to let the governor go on his way. Drugs are a serious issue in the state of Vermont. Courts do not appear to be holding people responsible for the crimes. What are your thoughts?
Well, it depends on what part of Vermont, right? It really does make a difference as to who the state's attorney is. And the courts, they suffered through the pandemic as well. There's a lot of backload in terms of court cases. So I think some are doing the right things, others are probably being a little too lenient. And so that's for the counties who elect their state's attorneys to decide. And I believe that people should be given breaks. We have a lot of conversations with the legislature in terms of who should be given a second chance or a third chance or a fourth chance. And I believe that we should be able to provide that, but not to everyone, not for serious crimes. Everyone has to be held accountable in some way for their actions. And so we'll continue to have those conversations with the legislature, but I think there has to be some accountability. We just can't let it go because then there's no reason for people to do the right thing.
June is Pride Month. Across the state, there are various parades, celebrations, including one here in Rutland on Saturday, June 17th, where Center Street will be closed down. There'll be activities and events all day long. This event is being held by Rutland County Pride, whose primary economic driver and it has drag events. I'm not reading the question very well. And it has, at times, there are anti-trans, anti-drag rhetoric, and it's at an all-time high. How do you feel Rutland leaders in this room should support Rutland County Pride and other organizations that are economic drivers for our region?
Well, I've participated in a couple of the Pride parades in Burlington when they've had them. I still continue to believe that people should be, it's part of who we want to be. They should be able to be the person they want to be. They should have that freedom to do that, and we should support them. So I know it's difficult for some, but when you really do break it down, we're put on this earth, and we're given the opportunity to be whoever we want to be. That's part of the beauty of being the United States in our Declaration of Independence. It gives us freedom to be who we are, and this is one area that I think that we should provide for that, because freedom is so important to us.
Are there any other cards out there that I've missed? Because then I have a very important question to ask the governor. Any other cards? This is a softball.
Great.
You have been governor now for quite a while, and I'm not going to ask you if you're running for re-election. Although I hope you do, as do 77% of the rest of the state of Vermont who are voting people. If you were to say there are 3 things that I love about my job as being governor in the state of Vermont, 3 things that make you get jazzed up and get out of bed every morning because you are going someplace, you're going to have a good time, this is why you do what you do. I'm letting you think here, I'm just keeping talking here, okay? Because he says, oh, what do I need to say? 3 things. When you talk to your wife, and she says, I know you're going to run for governor again because of those 3 things. What are they?
Well, it really goes back to the same principles we started with. You know, I'll go back to when I first decided to run for politics in general, run for office. I had no interest in politics whatsoever, and it was through my business that I saw all the regulatory reform and all the things that were standing in my way, and I kept complaining about what they just don't get it in Montpelier, and Montpelier for me was 2 miles down the road. I said, they just don't get it, they don't understand. And finally I looked at myself in the mirror and thought, maybe instead of complaining all the time, maybe I should do something about it. So I ran for office, not having any idea what I was doing. And I was elected my first try, and part of that was due to my name recognition with racing, I fully admit. But it doesn't keep you there. And I found over time that you can make a difference. And so when I think about why I ran for governor to begin with, because I didn't aspire to be governor. I wanted to be a race car driver. That's what I wanted to do. And I just happened to have a pathway where I thought I could make a difference. And I still believe that today. So grow the economy, make Vermont more affordable, and protect the most vulnerable. Those are the 3 things I think about every single day. And I still think there's a lot of work to do, but I think that we've made some ground, and we've made Vermont just a little bit more affordable. We've grown the economy just a little bit, and we protected the vulnerable, and we'll continue to do that. So there's a lot of work left to do. That gets me up in the morning, and when I see that I can help just 1 person, 2 people, a group, a business, that makes it all worthwhile.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Governor of the State of Vermont, Phil Scott. And I know the governor is going to take a quick exit here because he has places to go. So, but there is food over here if people wish to continue. We want to thank you all for being here. Governor, thank you for being here today.